And Sofie, Tom Hitchcock, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you as well. Good to see you, Tom.
Good to see you as well. I'm glad you got over your flu, cold, man flu, and all the trimmings, and you're looking pretty healthy to me.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a rough couple of days, and I do still hear myself sounding a little more like a jazz singer than I usually do, but I'm almost on the other side. So thank you for the flexibility.
You're more than welcome. So, whereabouts are you based, Anne?
I'm based in Denmark, so calling from Scandinavia.
There we are. I knew you were back in Europe over that way, so you're going into your summertime now. Yes. We're coming into our winter here. Okay, so we've got to change the temperature, and I feel like I'm an old man complaining about the weather, and I need a heated blanket or something.
That's why you need to watch out for the colds. That's
it. I don't know. So obviously, I'm from the UK originally. I don't know how I would live in the UK again if I'm not what I'm used to it being like here. Whereabouts in Denmark are you?
I'm based in Vejle, so it's a smaller city. I think most of your listeners won't know Vejle, but it's around 2.5 hours from Copenhagen.
Okay, and that's where you're from originally?
I'm originally from the south of Denmark, very close to the German border, and then I've lived in Copenhagen for many years as well, and then I relocated back to the part of Denmark that is connected to the rest of Europe, and that's where Vejle is based.
Actually, you know what? I like. I don't know if you're much of a movie person. I'm a bit of a movie snob. I'm a snob in some different areas. But I watched a Danish movie not so long ago called Land of Mine. Have you seen that?
I don't think so.
It's a true story, which always adds a little bit of impact to it, I find. But it's an afterthought story of World War II. So it's when the Germans leave, retract from Denmark. But then what they've done is because they thought the Allies were going to invade there, they had all the mines out on the beaches. So they used the leftover Nazis to clean it all up. And it's a bit of an untold story, a bit quirky.
Yeah, it's I've heard about what went down after the Second World War on the West Coast. It was tough in Denmark too.
Anyway, I'm making small talk here. More importantly, I want to hear your story, as do our listeners as well. So without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for inviting me to share my background story.
You're welcome.
So overall, I have a background as a psychologist, and I've always worked within the field of work and organizational psychology, but in different ways. I've had quite the journey from a more traditional start, working with new managers, stress management, assessments, stuff like that, till organizational development, and even had the pleasure of working closely together with people from design and architecture on how workplace experiences feed into everyday behavior at work. And now I run my own company together with my partner. She's called Anna Clara, and she's also an organizational psychologist. And we focus on building and creating initiatives that support organizations and leaders drive and run sustainable work lives. So it's a combination of everything we picked up through our career and really our passion points. We know how much work impacts people's well-being and everyday thoughts, motivations, etc. And we also know that there are unfortunately people who don't thrive in the workplace, and we have a very big passion on helping organizations create smart decisions for themselves and support well-being.
Okay, all right. So two quick questions for you. And I'm not too sure if these have crossed your path or our paths at all. Have you heard of an organisation called Metis People?
I don't think so. Maybe.
So they're one of our partners, and they do a lot of leadership reports and assessments for the
Mm,
workplace. They're one of the thought leaders in this space because they've moved away from the old traditional, bit more rigid models, and as things advance, they get a bit more sophisticated.
right.
But they're from near where you are, and I wasn't sure if our paths had crossed there, and that, but they'd probably be a nice introduction for you.
Oh, nice. Thank
And
you for
and the
suggesting.
second one as well for you. Have you ever heard of the Wisdom Index?
Yes, I think so. Similar to the happiness index a little bit.
Yeah, it is similar. But it's all based on exactly what you talk about, wise organizations. So it's talking about businesses and how the structure is and how it's defined. And obviously wisdom could be categorized in many different ways. And they've spent 15 years working on this,
Mm,
created this index, and then they apply it to organizational health. So it looks at, I
right.
suppose the easy way to look at it is what an unwise business is. So how to do it, toxic
Yeah.
workforce, da, 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 da. It's got a lot of wellness in there, which is
Mm,
what made me think of it. We've been working quite closely with them for a number of years now, and it's fascinating what they're doing. But what I find, as with anything like that, it's brilliant in academia, and there's years of it, and it blows my mind where they go with it. But then it's got its practical use, and that's where it gets stuck, you know.
exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the key challenges in I guess in lots of psychology research, but especially when it comes to larger groups and organizations, how do we really apply it in a practical way, while also knowing that we want evidence-based approaches that people can use, so that it can actually
Imagine.
be transferred to everyday activities, right?
It's fascinating because when I first looked at the Wisdom Index, when I looked at the categories, and it's quite a significant size document, so it takes some reading to
Right.
get through it. And I said to one of the professors, I said, well, according to this, my business is also unwise. Okay.
Mm,
But it's not unwise out of choice, it's unwise out of necessity, because
mm,
a lot of things that made for a wise organization, it costs a lot. Okay.
mm.
So to give X amount of time off to invest that a bit extra into every single
Yeah.
person, as a small business, it's not there. It's not as you don't have that opportunity as a small organization. So it
Mm,
really was only befitting to a corporation who had
mm.
disposable income and wanted to look at retention and wellness strategies.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Sure.
So with what you do, so you work with organizations, but so I was always interested into organizational change, but through the individuals. It's a bit square peg round hole.
Right, right. Yeah, we work with organizations, mainly private organizations, but we also have some clients who are part of the public sector in Denmark. But we work directly with the senior leadership. It could also be the HR department or the health and safety team and line management, etc. We work more on those levels than with the employees directly. And if we work on change-related initiatives, it would usually be a classic cascading principle design. We've done quite much on supporting organizations who are going through larger change processes like reorgs or reforms. So how they can actually set themselves up in a way that will protect employees in terms of well-being, because we know that organizational restructures is one of the key risk factors into to lower well-being, because it creates uncertainty. Maybe people are worried if they will lose their job or not. Maybe that's not the case, but they don't know what the future will hold for them. They don't know who their colleagues will be if they're moved to another team, what they will do. Maybe some of their passion areas are dissolved and they are now to work on something else. And it really creates a lot of uncertainty and distress for some people. And one of the things that's quite common is that the senior leadership have been aware of the change for much longer. So their own reactions to change have mellowed. And there is a risk that there will be communications gap when it's then communicated to employees who are just informed and don't have all the context. And that's where some of the distress can become even higher. So we work with the different parties, usually the leadership levels, and how they can tune in on supporting their organization through changes, because most organizations have to do changes to keep up, right?
Well, change is one of the only constants, really, isn't it? But you're quite right. People don't like it, especially when they're within their comfort zone. It affects their right to earn and their livelihoods. But it's an interesting point when you make is when the leadership, the C-suite and so forth team have got used to it. So maybe some rebuttal to it, but they've got used to it. They've accepted it. By the time it gets down to the workforce per se, then they've still got it fresh, but it's already happening. So it feels like they've got very little say or influence in the proposed change or the changes, if you like.
Exactly.
Is there a way to get it? Sorry to interrupt there. Is there a way to get it so that they're more involved, so they feel part of that process and they've had their say and they're more accepting of the change?
Yeah, it's definitely a good practice to engage people throughout, but here you also need to be super precise in your communication to set the right expectations, because what you don't want is people to later on feel as if it was like a pseudo engagement, that they were engaged but they were never really included or their perspectives didn't really matter. Then it can backfire. So it's super important to be clear on expectational settings. So what is actually possible for employees or middle management to impact and what's not. So even though they will be asking for something you can't provide as a senior leader, it's better to let them know that this is the area you can impact. Over here, we've got it covered. There might be a reaction to that, but it's better than having people feel as if they were sort of like led astray or sort of involved.
It is about having that voice, but actually it being considered, so it can be factored in. And if you understand then that it's still a macro, so your one voice might not be the same as everybody else,
right?
You know,
exactly.
You need to swallow that. You are not the business in its entirety. There's a famous case I remember when they're building Terminal 5 in Heathrow in London, and state of the art, massive terminal. Went to press and they launched it, and the first day it broke down. The whole terminal broke down, and it's purely down to the baggage handling system. It wasn't fit for purpose, and albeit state of the art, and it was really well publicised because all the baggage handlers and the people working there have hundreds of thousands of staff, if you like. They all turned around and said at the beginning that's not going to work, but they didn't listen to them, and they just went with what they did, and then. The proposal from the people on the ground was the correct way of doing it, and it cost them, I think it's like £60 million or something to change it, and that's without the loss of earnings, without the terminal. And it's embarrassing them. If you just speak to the people on the ground at the key point with the right information and genuinely listen, then these things are prevented.
Exactly, and for the good of the organization in totality, but it does require planning. It does require that someone can drive that process. So I think organizations really need to factor that in when they plan on launching their upcoming changes.
So you talk a bit about wellness, okay, which is a rising tide of terminology and mindset. And we talk quite a bit about this in Australia with our clients and what have you. We talk to wellness, and it's a touch point as well. But when we talk wellness to companies, it actually has a slightly different take, and it has to be transactional. It sounds really bad, but
Mm.
it's as it is. So wellness in the world of business for the owners of the business, the stakeholders, and what have you, is about retention. It's about performance. It's about all those numbers. Otherwise, the wellness doesn't calculate. It doesn't make sense. It sounds really harsh, but that's the truth behind wellness. So it's almost like the moral compass behind the wellness type that isn't aligned to really where it should be. Does that make ring a bell with yourself?
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. That and it is an interesting challenge I think many organizations face, because there are actually quite many data points internally in organizations that you can combine to kind of get an overview of your status quo. But I think many organizations that we work with struggle with multiple areas or departments owning the data points and not necessarily having one area that combine everything. They might have an health and safety team that will have some data points. You would have the traditional people team having other data points. And you might have the team sitting with the health insurance data that will tell you a lot about how employees thrive. Of course, there's a level of confidentiality there, but there is actually quite much data. And if you then have it all separated out, you don't get that full picture. But I also see an increased focus on working with data just in general and people analytics. But it is, especially in larger organizations, you need to bundle it together and get some good insights. But I also experience that's especially a trend in Denmark at the moment, that there is a higher awareness on the importance of wellness, but it has also taken a different perspective. While for a long time there's been a focus on how are we doing in general, how are the workforce in general doing, while not looking into different segments so much. And right now there is a focus on looking at the leadership level in general. And there is a newfound focus on the well-being of the leader or the people leader in general, because first of all, there is clear evidence that if the people leader is not thriving, it will trickle down. If the people leader gets unwell and in worst case will leave on a sick leave, then you will see a higher tendency that team members will do the same. They're also harder to find a substitute for. They're also expensive. But the question is, why are people leaders struggling, and why haven't we been that focused on it before? They've probably struggled before as well, but there is a newfound focus on that it's actually all right as a people leader to show vulnerability, that it's not a weakness to seek support or help, and at the same time an awareness that people leaders now are faced with new demands that challenge them, especially emotional demands, because they are leading a new generation in the workforce, but also new trends on what is expected of them. So employees will expect that they can actually have open and honest conversations on how they are feeling. They want their people leader to meet them with an eye-to-eye, warm and open approach that make them feel seen and included. But that also requires that you as a people leader have some communication skills that can help, where you can regulate the emotions of your employees, you can navigate how they're feeling. And for some, that's very different. That's very different from how they were trained, and that can impact how they're doing on their own.
So you raised some good points there, because within leadership, essentially you're leading by example. So you need to have your self-regulation, your emotional intelligence covered yourself, so that the others can follow suit, which then sets the example for the communication style. But you use the word trend quite a bit there as well. And what I have found is vulnerability is a trend right now. It's something that's been more accepted because it in a superficial world of high stimulus, okay, and short attention spans, we're leaning and we're attracted to authenticity and sincerity. Okay? And that's exactly where vulnerability sits. It's right in there. Okay. And if you share something from the heart, it's from there, and you and what have you, it's actually a powerful statement to make, and this is a powerful leadership statement to make.
Yes, I think you're spot on. And I experience working with leaders, also younger, newer leaders who get this right very, very early on. So very seasoned leaders who've done this all along and who use it, and that's just who they are. But I also encounter leaders who were brought up in a different leadership style, where they've maybe been the specialist, and that's been what have taken them there, and they've been more directive, or it's been very different what helped them to succeed. So the classic example of what got them there won't take them to the next level, and they're suddenly faced with an experience of not being strong enough, not performing as leaders, and that will also impact their own well-being if they don't get support. And how do I need to adjust my way of working with my team members to keep along?
I think the generational difference on the workforce. So I'm talking about people that are still in the workforce and leadership, but near the tail end of their career. They would have inherited a more stoic approach. Okay, so it's strong, controlled. You do not show your emotions, and that is what leadership is. You go in, let me show you it's done. You know, no lunch breaks, blah blah blah, blah. And all that sort of stuff. And a really good example of it is hot in the press right now. Where I might stand corrected, but I would like to see the other side of this individual, because they display those same skills of leadership, and it's all commendable. And the best example I can think of this is Donald Trump. Okay, because he is very stoic, he is very strong, he is very decisive. There's all these characteristics that are respected in a leadership position. Agree or disagree with him is immaterial, but that's how the world knows him. But his wife will know a different version of him. Okay, and where he's questioning himself, maybe not, where he might shed a tear or two, where he might be angry and throw a plate across the room or whatever, you know. It'd be interesting to see what the other side of that is with someone like him.
Exactly, or profiles who, to your point, they've been leaders for a long time, and they've been trained in using this more stoic approach, to use your term, and suddenly they need to move to an area where they need to use areas of their personality that they maybe kept for their private lives, and now it's actually required in their engagements and with employees, for them to keep being a credible people leader, keep being someone that people want to follow in a leadership level. But it's, it change is hard, especially if you've done it in the same thing for many years.
We rolling back a few years now, we run an event right in the middle of COVID. So just as COVID happened, then it had a double dip or something. So right in the middle, we did an in-person event for business owners, specifically. So the people where the buck stops with them, people's mortgages are relied upon you and your behaviour and how you turn up. And the reason we run that event, very close to what you're talking about outright, but it was because that's probably the loneliest place in business, because you can't, you speak to your loved ones, they're actually not going to quite get it. Okay, well-intentioned, but they're not going to get it. It's very hard to speak to your staff and your leadership team there, because when the buck stops you, so they need an outlet. But we figured if we could do some good with just those few people in the room, they could have 100 staff, 1,000 staff, whatever. And their families, we can actually help much greater pool of people by, to your point earlier, by helping that person there. But definitely that loneliness part of people lack of really understanding of the situation you're in is essential to crack, really.
I think that is so important and something to keep shedding a light on when it comes to well-being for people leaders, because it is lonely if you're then a founder. It's maybe even more lonely if you don't have a network. We know that one of the most important protective and preventive mechanisms when it comes to well-being is social support and social capital. We all need someone to lean on. We need a pack, someone or a group of people we know we can come to if things have been hard. And unfortunately, some are very much alone in their role, especially if they lead their own organization. For others, even though they're in large organizations, they might not feel safe in the leadership team they're in. It might be a very different environment where it's more a competition, or who will win the focus from the C-suite in the dialogue, which hinders that social support that probably everyone in the room will need, because they're humans. We all need it, right? And I hope that's something that will be dialed up in the general conversation on well-being for leaders. We've known it for a long time for teams, how important social cohesion, social support is, but because we've been, I think, not focused enough on ensuring these more vulnerable conversations for leaders to take place, we haven't really had the conversation on, you know what, as a leader, you need your group too, and how, if you can't find them in your current organization, you need to come to someone like you guys, who can set up a structure where you can meet others you can learn from.
And I suppose this whole area that we're talking about is really your focal point on what you're trying to achieve and what you're motivated by.
Yes, very much. I believe we spend so much time at work. It's at least a third of our day. And I think we all have an obligation to help each other get the most out of that time, and hopefully leave more energized than when we came. That's very not realistic every day, but hopefully it could be something to strive for, enhancing. So I believe that work psychology, organizational psychology, industrial psychology, it's called many things across the world, is key to how we work on well-being in general.
I do agree with that, because obviously our biggest investment in our life is our career, whether you're a business owner or not.
Yeah.
And you want an ROI on it, but you also don't want to sell your soul and your health in the process.
Exactly. So even though it can take you faster if you're skipping collaboration, and sometimes you need to make decisions on your own and just be with that. I generally believe we get further if we work together, but also that it's much better for our general well-being if we have a good group of people around us that we also feel committed and accountable for, because we also impact their well-being.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, well, listen, that probably brings us to a close for this episode.
Right.
Okay. Anybody listening to your episode that'd like to make contact with you, would somewhere like LinkedIn be the right place for them to reach out to you?
They can definitely find me on LinkedIn. There's also a link to our website on my LinkedIn profile, but they can find me there, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm sure plenty of people will make contact with you, but it's been a pleasure, and thanks for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. as before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.